Where do we start from? I think we gotta, start this conversation. Hopefully, get you to run us through, and then, intermittently, you
I'll let
probably
you
the
start.
subject matter
I'll let you
specialist here.
start because I let you start. You know me. I'm a very. I don't.
Right, right. So that would be good because you have the legal background. I can bring in my misconceptions, and I want you to give clarity on some of those. That would
Okay.
make more sense.
Okay.
Okay.
But
Yesterday
first of all,
we were basically looking at just the
first of
speech.
all, I've got a disclaimer, and I think I'll do this every time I go on live. You've known me for years, so people I don't think people understand that. We've come a long way. Basically, when I talk, I get very passionate. My voice, it's like I'm loud. It's like I'm angry. I'm fighting. I'm
Oh
talking. That's
no,
how
oh
I talk.
no. Those who don't know you would think
Yeah.
that way.
Okay.
So.
All right. So I'm just letting them know because I see people saying, "Oh, but you're screaming." I'm like, please, if I'm screaming too much, just check out and just go somewhere else. That's just how I talk. So
that
bring it on. Bring it on, Omar.
we're quite all right. That's mostly probably for people who do not know. So when you join lives like this, of course I could basically say the same. This is like a personal friend. We've gone through a lot of things. We've done a lot together. So if you join a live and you see us having a very intense conversation, just be civil and just be professional because at the end of the day, these are two people who basically know each other and have done a lot of things together. That's just for people to understand. So if we join conversations like this, we all, in as much as it's about our country, it got to be very civil and we got to be, very democratic, irrespective of either what Melville says is in favor of what you think or what I say is against what you think. At the end of the day, it's a conversation around our country, and that is the common denominator here. Everything that we see, irrespective of our personal relations and all of that, the Gambia belongs to all of us. So first, yesterday we had a conversation about the speech. Today, of course, we will go into the details of what exactly this commission is all about. And for me, to be honest with you, I paid little attention to the commission in the beginning. But today, what I did was, after having some conversations with you yesterday, I went on to look at the white paper. And when I looked at the white paper, and I realized that there is nothing where they were mentioning the TOR of the commission, where it is mentioned that the commission has a mandate to go about selling stuff. So what I saw on the white paper was that the commission was supposed to do an inquiry and, of course, make recommendations. So if the commission is to establish the truth about how Jammeh got some of those assets, either legally or illegally, and now it got to a point that in the middle of the commission, before it gets to its conclusion, before it actually even established that Jammeh got some of these assets illegally, they started selling some of those assets. Now, how would you justify that the secretary to a commission who is supposed to take all documentation all of a sudden turns out to be, a salesperson? But how would the commission secretary turn into a salesperson? And then the commissioners are there, the Ministry of Justice is there, the government of the Gambia is there, the National Assembly is there. They did not put up an alarm to say, hello, is this part of your mandate? And if it is part of their mandate, morally, how could you start selling items in the middle of an investigation that you've not concluded yet? So that has both moral and legal bearings, and I would definitely want clarity on this from your end. Now, the second aspect of things that I definitely want to look at is that the president said in his speech that 9 volumes of a report was given to him. But Melville, I don't understand. You worked in government at the top level. If you are giving a report as the head of state or as government, and then on the basis of the report given to you, you came out with a white paper. That means government had gone through this particular report, these 9 volumes that were given to them, and then they came out with a white paper. Now, but in the 9 volumes, the president said that the details of the sales of individual assets, who they sold them to, how they sold them, the prices that were there, was never sent to him. And he knew that something is missing in the report. But he believed that someday, by divine he did not say that, I'm just adding that. By divine intervention, the missing reports will come. But what I make up of this is that I don't fault the president too much, because if you look at it from a reflective thinking point, when the change happened, we all thought that, yeah, Jammeh as a president at the time was micromanaging a lot of ministries. And then most of you experts who joined the government at the time, we all believe in most of you because these are professionals and you've dealt with them, but either nationally, internationally, they've got a reputation that they are good at what they're doing. And the president explicitly said he does not probably know enough about the job, but he's going to rely on his technicians. So I think the president actually gave leverage to all of these people to operate independently, expecting that they will work to the best of their ability. And what I have realized is that people capitalize on the president's probably vulnerability to scam the country, and then there was no checks and balances. So for me, I don't fault the president too much. He gave, let's say he give the people the liberty and the democracy to operate independently to the best interest of our country. He was not micromanaging ministries. But in the end, now he bears the biggest burden of complicity and criminal doings within some of those ministries, and which the Ministry of Justice cannot be left out. So my take finally on this particular subject is that the president should have, in my view, after getting those 9 volumes and realize that these people have some missing items, call Batambir and say, where are the missing items? Why didn't you have these details? Because if he said in his speech yesterday that he knew some things were missing, why didn't the president ask the Ministry of Justice of the missing items? Why didn't he ask the commission of the missing items? But first, I would really want you to give us a perspective that the commission have a mandate to go about selling this stuff. And even if they have the mandate, should they start selling this stuff in the middle of the commission without getting any conclusions? And then even if they had to do that, was that supposed to be done on the basis of a court order, or they just had to go about it because they are perishable goods? So-called perishable goods, because I don't understand how cattle is a perishable good. Sheep and goats, up till date, we did not even have a list of buyers and the amounts they were buying for. So that means the list is still, a lot of, components of the list are still pending. What do you make up of that?
Okay. The first thing we're gonna do, I really want us to go in depth today. I want us to get to the bottom of everything. So what I'm gonna do is we're going to look at how the Janneh Commission was created, how it came into being, how it came into existence. So basically, Section 201 of the 1997 Constitution mandated, that's where the commission derived its mandate from. And that is the power of the president to create commissions of inquiry. Now, we know that the Janneh Commission had a mandate and a term of reference. One major objective of the commission was to investigate the circumstances surrounding the withdrawal of funds from the Central Bank of the Gambia, including accounts such as the International Gateway account and the Kanaji Mining Project account, examining the involvement of the executive arm of government under former President Janneh in the withdrawal and application of funds or resources from public bodies to enterprises, including but not limited to SSHFC, GPA, GAMTEL, NAWEC, AMRC, and GNPC. Now, furthermore, the mandate that they had was to determine whether resources meant for the government or for the people of the Gambia were diverted or converted or misappropriated by or under direction of the former executive or by Janneh. Okay? Then another mandate was to investigate the extent of former President Janneh's involvement in public procurement and whether any losses were caused to the government due to such involvement. Okay? Then, after they have identified persons or group of persons who committed any offense in relations to any of the matter inquired into by the commission would recommend ways to improve the supervision of government accounts to prevent irregular withdrawals, recommend methods for recovering or restoring any assets, monies, or other resources that may have been illegally taken, misappropriated, misapplied, or lost. So this is the mandate of the commission.
Now, that is
Now,
one thing I want to ask you. Somebody told me that there is a law which is different from the mandate of the commission about the establishments of commissions, and sometimes they have the mandate to sell and do whatever. What is there such law that establishes commissions that is different from the specific mandate of this particular commission?
yes, and that is section 202 subsection section 202 of the 19. Have you got the 1997 Constitution here? But I'll read it for you. Let me just look at it. It's section 202. I think subsection 2, paragraph D, something like that. Just give me a second. I'll pull it up and I'll read it for you. Okay, so section 202 of the 1997 Constitution, 202.2, it says commissions of inquiry possesses all the powers, rights, privileges of a high court judge during a trial, but it doesn't stop there. It says specifically, okay, enforcing the attendance of witnesses, examining them under oath, affirmation, and other things, compelling the production of documents relevant to the inquiry, issuing commissions or requests for the examination of witnesses abroad,
Yep.
and then making interim orders as necessary during the course of the investigation. Okay?
Right.
Now, this is section 202, 2, subsection D.
Right.
Now, this is what people didn't quite understand in the beginning when the commission was set up. Because some people were saying, I mean, I remember doing a write-up when I said that the commission has powers of the High Court, but the commission is not a court of law.
Right.
Right? That's a subject of debate for another day because it's a bit complicated.
Right.
But now, when you look at the terms of reference of the commission,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at the powers that commissions do have, the only part that we can look at, really, when it comes to the commission having powers, as if it was a high court judge giving those orders, is specific. It is not broad. So it says commissions of inquiry possesses all the powers, rights, and privileges of a high court judge during a trial, specifically enforcing the attendance of witnesses, compelling the production of documents, issuing commissions or requests, and making interim orders. But even there, it is not a blanket. It is not open-ended.
Yeah.
It says making interim orders as necessary during the course of the investigation. Okay? So you could tell that the foundational mandate of the commission is investigation.
Yep.
So if you want to limit that and qualify it based on the Constitution, based on this particular issue vis-a-vis the Janneh Commission, you can qualify that the investigation that the commission was doing was to look into the assets of former President Janneh, but that was a bit, it was far removed because the foundational objective was to establish whether funds from the state, funds that belong to the Gambian people, were diverted into personal use by the president or by extension, the executive. This was the foremost objective. Now, if you have that as an objective, to investigate, what do you think logically? Just think about it logically. Forget, you don't have to be a lawyer to understand that. We're going to take logic. Your powers, the foundational powers that you have, from which everything else stems from, is to investigate, to establish whether what belongs to Omar definitely belongs to Omar. It came from the resources of Omar through hard work, through salaries, through investment, or whether these funds, these assets came from the public purse.
Right.
Now, going to your question, even though the commission has the mandate to make interim orders, but that was not blanket. It said interim orders specific to their investigation.
Right.
Now, how can you justify that the interim orders to sell was specifically for the investigation?
Right.
The interim orders to sell had nothing to do with the investigation.
Certainly so.
I'll read it again so people don't think I'm making this up.
Mm-hmm.
One last time. It says, under section 2022, a commission of inquiry possesses all the powers, rights, and privileges of a high court judge during a trial. Specifically, enforcing the attendance of witnesses, compelling the production of documents, issuing commissions or requests, making interim orders as necessary during the course of investigation, not during the course of recommendation, not during the course of asset disposal, not during the course of whatever it was. It says during the course of investigation. The orders you make
Mm-hmm.
has to have a nexus with investigation.
Right.
That is the power that the commission had.
Right.
Now, for the commission, just to answer your question, we're dealing with one issue at a time. For the commission to make an order to sell, to dispose of assets, I'm not going to go into the reason or the rationale for disposing any asset. We're looking at squarely the fact of whether they had the mandate to do that according to law. Because remember, the commission is a fact-finding mission that they embarked on.
Right.
They want to know whether the funds were misappropriated, the funds were diverted, the funds were siphoned, and these funds were public funds meant for every Gambian.
Right.
Whether financial regulations have been broken, whether certain government accounts, the gateway accounts, and all the things were tampered with for the benefit of one man and his associates.
Right.
Okay? Now, the problem that I see from the very establishment of the Janneh commission is that the commission entered into it emotionally.
Yeah.
As lawyers, as people who are mandated by law, there are two things you have to squarely look at. Two things: the facts and the law. And that is
Right.
why lawyers take an oath. Because, like somebody said to me today, then it would mean that anybody can go and be a lawyer. Why do you have to take an oath? If you
Okay.
are not, if everybody, if Omar, I have to delve into legal issues by putting Omar as a person and saying, oh, Omar made me drive all over Gambia and I was his driver back then.
Yeah.
No, I have to look at the facts and look at the law, irrespective of what Janneh did. Janneh could have killed the entire Gambia. Janneh could have done a lot of bad. But the fact is, Janneh had constitutional rights, and his rights must be respected according to law. Now, if you go to court, let's go back to section 202 that says the commission has a power or has the power that is akin to a high court judge. Sorry, I'm getting distracted because I'm trying to read the comments. I think I'm just going to ignore the comments. So it says the commission has powers that is akin to a high court judge, right? Now, when a high court judge makes an order, I want you to pay attention to this. When a high court judge makes an order, the high court judge does not enforce its order.
Yeah.
Because you cannot be a police and a judge at the same time. And that is why you have a sheriff. You have the sheriff division. So all orders and judgments of the courts are enforced by the sheriff.
Right.
And that is why the sheriff is only answerable to the Chief Justice. Because it is independent. Even though it is part of the judiciary, it's an independent entity. So, even I am not agreeing to that, but let us assume that the Janneh Commission decided that they were going to dispose of certain assets of Janneh due to whatever reason. They did not have the powers to enforce their own orders because there won't be any checks and balances, and it would be subjected to corruption and fraud, which is what we are now dealing with.
Great.
Because the entity itself that made the order is the entity itself that decided to execute
Its own
its
order.
own orders.
Yeah.
Not even the courts will execute their own orders. Not even the courts have the powers to execute their own orders and judgments. It is the sheriff, who is an independent body, that will do that. Now, I'll give you another irony of all of these things, which further clouds everything. The secretary to the commission, Kura, was part of the commission.
Right.
Now, I enjoyed the exchange between you and him where he said that the person to ask was Ami Bensouda.
Right.
But what he failed to address is the fact that he did not have an order to execute from Ami Bensouda personally, but from the commission. But he, Quran, that raised the issue and objected to irregularities in the commission, should have known and understood the mandate of the commission, to know as a seasoned accountant, or I don't know what he is, to know that he could not have had a mandate from the commission to sell where the commission had made an order to sell, and he goes on to sell when he is part of the commission.
Let's put the law aside here and look at it from a logical point of view. First, Kurang was actually, let's say, in as much as he makes a
No,
lot of
before
fuss
you get
about,
that,
right?
before you get to that, now, I just want to buttress this fact that the commission did not have a mandate to sell.
Right.
Even whereas they could make interim orders, where I believe that the interim orders specifically dealt with orders that had to do with the investigation, which was their foremost mandate. But if they go ahead to even say and justify that they had a mandate to sell, they couldn't have executed, because who would determine the price of whatever it was that they wanted to sell? Is it that the commission itself that gave a mandate to sell, that made an order to sell? The commission is now setting the bar as to what is the price of these commodities or whatever they were selling, the cattle.
But
Now it is beautiful. It is beautiful for Kurang to come out and say and point out to the anomalies that was going on in the commission. But I have not seen Kurang say how he arrived at determining the price of tractors or cattle that was sold.
this is exactly what I was coming at. You're finishing it all.
So
Come on,
who
come on.
was the independent body that was mandated to make these prices?
Right.
And you see the reason why the commission should not have sold. Because if the commission sells following its own orders, even where corrupted practices were not involved, it just logically flows that the human mind would wonder, why would you make such an order?
Right.
Because the order could have been done for your individual benefits.
Right.
But if you made an order and then the sheriff was directed to execute the order, and the proceeds of sale be deposited into an interest-bearing account, awaiting the final determination of the commission whether these cattle were indeed properties of the state that was diverted by Janneh. But when this was being done, it has not yet been established by the commission that these things were not Janneh's personal property.
Yeah.
So what it basically means is that the commission was not as independent as it should be. And the commission was not able to divorce themselves from public opinion, where everybody thought that Janneh stole. The commission should have confined themselves to the law, look at the facts by way of the evidences before them, and come to a conclusion by way of the facts and the law.
Now, posted there. That's exactly what I tried to put across yesterday. And somebody said to me that anything they took from Janneh is good. I was like, no, that is your opinion. That's your feelings. And then you don't actually bring about justice through emotions. But first, I want to focus on Kurang in the first place, because this is an individual who was actually, identified as the secretary to the commission. Now, his role was basically to get all the detailed information for the commission. Now, if the commission's mandate are specifically mentioned in the white paper that I read today, there is no portion of that that said, go about selling stuff. But logically and just out of common sense, you as the commission who is there to investigate if Janneh got some of these assets legally or illegally, before you establish that he got them legally or illegally, you actually went about selling the stuff. Give me a second. All right. You went about selling the items before even establishing that Janneh got them illegally or legally. So that means the commission started with a prejudice and a preconceived mentality that everything and anything that belongs to Janneh was stolen. This is not true. In as much as we either like or dislike Janneh, we cannot say that an individual works as a head of state in a country for 22 years and of course has been in the military for probably more than 10, 15 years. And then all of a sudden you tell us that everything and anything the person ever owned were all stolen. That cannot be true. That means the commission was not basing its investigation on anything empirical. It was a prejudice, and it was just a, probably a sore boy, event that was just there to carry out an activity and to go about selling everything and anything that Janneh owns. Because before you establish the ownership of the vehicles, the ownership of the cows, the sheep, and the goats, you already start selling them. But what I don't understand is Kurang, being the secretary to the commission, all of a sudden became a salesperson who identified Kurang as a salesperson, who gave Kurang the authority to go about selling Jammeh's assets, and then who actually identified the prices that Kurang was actually selling these assets for. And Kurang comes out to brag that I sold the assets at a higher price than the rest of the people when they fired me and they start selling them at a lower price. But Kurang did not understand that he never had the mandate to go about the sales that he was doing. So out of ignorance and not understanding his role in the commission, he started talking about, oh, I was able to sell them at a higher price. But first the question, Kurang, do you have the mandate to sell anything? You were just as identified
Not
as the
not o-
secretary to this
not
particular
only
commission.
that, but even if Kurang had the mandate, which we all know and have agreed that he doesn't have, who was the independent valuer that valued those cattle or the tractors to ensure that it commensurated with government process?
He said he brought Gainakos from his village.
On whose authority?
No, but when asked about the authority, he said, if you have the balls, go and ask Ami Ben Suda and whatever
But
Janneh.
the problem is, let me read this.
Let me finish.
Section 2,
Mhm.
section 2.
What I have a
Okay,
problem with
go on.
on that is that the junglers, when they were taking to the CRRC, they said they were following orders. Now, Kurang told me this morning that he was following orders. So that means Kurang did not know his TOR, even though it should have been explicitly clear to him what his role was in the commission, what he needs to do, and where his parameters would have actually stopped. But Kurang went on to say that,
But that is
I
very
should go and ask.
ironical. But that is very ironical because he, Quran, said that when Ami Bensouda asked him or told him or expressed interest in the tractors, he told Ami Bensouda to go and do an open process. So, which means that Quran was not following instructions blindly. That was why he went against Ami Bensouda.
But yet he went ahead
But
selling the stuff.
then when you cornered him today, he then come out to say that you should go and ask Ami Bensouda. That is just like what happened in the TRRC, where everybody said I was following orders from the top.
Right.
So you can see the conflict. 1 minute you are actually following everything that is mandated in the right and appropriate way. But then you believe that you, as part of the commission, had a mandate to execute, to enforce. But the Janneh Commission never had a mandate to enforce. Their mandate was to investigate and make recommendations to the executive, to the president, because Section 200, 202, 200 of the Constitution gave the president the legal standing to set up the commission. That is why the commissioners were appointed by the president. So when they make their reports, when they finish and conclude their findings, they present their report to the president. That report is not law. That report has no authority. It is when the government looks at the report, studies the report, and decides to accept the recommendation, then it is translated into a government white paper. When it is translated into a government white paper, that is when it becomes policy and finds a legal footing. So the commission had no mandate to enforce, but by selling and disposing of these assets, I believe they have made an enforcement, and I believe they outstepped their legal
Right.
mandate because they did not have that power to enforce. Now, I'll give you a classic example just to support my argument. When you listen to Batambedu at the For the People by the People show, he said they went to court to sell the rest of the cattle. And that was what he obtained judgment for, the Ministry of Justice, and that was what the sheriff now sold. But if the commission had the mandate to sell, why did Batambedu go to the court to get an order from the court to sell?
And then did not go back to the commission
And did
to
not go
ask them
back
to
to the
go and sell.
commission to execute that order and sell.
Oh, Kurang Dev don't take Bopam. He did not know what he was talking
So
about.
what was happening, and I'll tell you, I've drawn my own conclusion with this. The reason why Batambedu moved away from the commission, from selling those particular cattle when the commission was subsisting, was because the commission, well, when they were selling, they had their own valuer and they sold.
Oh.
But when Batambedu took the matter to the court and the order was given, they did not only allow the sheriff to sell, which is what the law stipulates, the Ministry of Justice came with a valuer that valued the cattle, and the sheriff sold. That in itself is illegal, because the Ministry of Justice should never, the only thing they could have done was to go and identify the cattle and the various things to be sold. But they cannot determine the price. They cannot come to the sheriff and say, this cattle is 400, Nakbi is 500, the goat is 300. Because they had gone to the court had granted their release by way of an order, and and then the sheriff executes. And when this thing is sold, it should have been put in interest-bearing account until the final determination. But then if you look at it logically, you want to ask yourself the question, why was the Janneh Commission selling cattle and the Ministry of Justice went to court to obtain an order to sell cattle?
The same cattle.
Why couldn't the Ministry of Justice go back to the Janneh Commission to sell?
Yeah, right.
But the truth is, the Ministry of Justice was all the time aware that Janneh Commission had no mandate to sell. Even if they had the mandate to make an interim order to dispose of these things, because of whatever reason, because they were depreciating, because maybe keeping the cattle and stuff was overbearing for the government, they should have written a report, an interim report to the president, because that commission was mandated by law, by virtue of the powers that the president had in section 200 of the 1997 constitution. So the commission was only answerable to the president. So what they should have done by law was to make an interim report, present it to the president and the executive by extension, to say that we have a situation, we have these cattle, we have these things. And then the president would instruct the line ministry responsible, which was the justice ministry, to go to the courts and get an order like they did. And then the sheriff would sell. And then these things, at that moment, remember, it is not yet determined who owns it, whether Janneh acquired it legally or illegally. And these sale, supervised by the sheriff, would have these amounts collected, deposited in an interest-bearing account, awaiting the final determination of whether they were illegally acquired by Janneh, or whether they came out of Janneh's salary or Janneh's inheritance or Janneh's investment.
Right. Now, there is another thing that I did not understand. After the commission's investigation and everything and all the reports, there is nothing that Janneh actually owned legally. That defeats common logic and common sense. I don't understand that. Is that out of prejudice, or generally Janneh never owned anything legally?
Well, the point is, like I said, the commission was based on emotions. Now, while I respect, I'll give you an example, while I totally and honestly respect the decisions of the courts, the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, the High Court. I wholly respect their decisions. But as a lawyer, I don't have to agree with their decisions. I do not agree that the 1997 Constitution does not contain any immunity clauses for the former president and his associates. I don't believe that Yankuba Ture has no immunity. The fact is, from my own understanding, the court should have looked at the immunity and determined whether he satisfied the criteria and ingredients to benefit from that immunity. But to
Because
say
they
that
exist, because they
but to
exist in the law.
say, but because you are mad at Yankuba Ture, because Yankuba Ture is rude, because Yankuba Ture was not respectful to the commission, does not in law validate the fact that he should be charged and found guilty of murder. The principal witness, which is the Kani guy, lied on the oath. He came to the commission to say, I lied, whilst he was on the oath. In any other jurisdiction in the world, that man will never testify in a court of law, and his testimony will never stand in any court.
Okay.
So
We got that. We got
the
that
reason
factor.
I'm giving that
Right.
example is because I firmly believe that the commissioners went into the commission with a preconceived notion that Janneh Amudara Sacha Katla everything lum amdef Kosacha.
Right.
Even before establishing it on facts and evidence.
And it was never established on facts and evidence because you started selling his items before actually coming out, concluding your investigation. So what are you investigating?
Okay, I understand that the commission's mandate was to look at Janneh and his associates. Does Janneh's mother qualify as an associate? Why would you freeze the account of Janneh's mother? You want to tell me that Janneh's family, if Janneh's mother was alive, Janneh's mother can come to Gambia and not have a home to stay, to live in, because Janneh took everything from government? What happened to Janneh's legal salary for 22 years?
But is Janneh
What
not from a
happened to
home?
Janneh's earning for 22 years as
Is Janneh
president?
not from a home? Did Janneh fall from the sky?
But if you take everything from Janneh, including freezing Janneh's mother's account, it shows that was not looking at the facts, because nothing was established that the funds that went into Janneh's mother's account was state funds that was diverted into her account.
Right.
There was absolutely nothing. And even today, even after Janneh, there are ministers in our government. There are people in governments that would buy properties and put it in their kids' names to secure it. And when you take them to court, those assets belong to their kids.
Now, I want you to give a comparative analysis here, because if we actually agree that, okay, let's just give the benefit of the doubt that Janneh did not own anything and everything belongs to the state. Now, if that is the basis of the commission, would it be equally right that if the next president steps down, we say every other thing you built while you were president, and we now understand that this government is so filled with corruption that everything that you own, we are going to seize it because you did not acquire it legally?
Well, the difference would be, with this government, they will make the claim that Barrow has not killed anyone. I personally believe that the only reason why Janneh was treated in that manner was because Janneh, they claim, allegedly killed. But the point is, regardless if Janneh killed, why do you take alleged murderers to court to determine the fact? Why is Usainu Bojan in court after government officials came out to say that he was in a rally? They already pronounced him guilty. Why are they taking him to court? Is to test the veracity of the allegation. So even if Janneh was as bad itself, in a democratic system, in a government that prides itself in democratic ideals, he should have been availed his constitutional rights to defend. Now, I'll tell you this, though.
Now, before you say that, let me. Was Janneh actually pronounced a defendant in all these court cases they were going to and getting all these freezing orders? Did they serve Janneh? Like, because you cannot tell me that you're going to court without having the defendant and you never actually served him anything. Was anything like that done? Because Batambedu was asked this question and he said he cannot remember.
Well, I can
when people don't want to tell the truth, they just say they cannot remember.
I can remember because I dealt with that file at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I dealt with it. No one did. I dealt with that file where the commission asked to serve former President Janneh in Equatorial Guinea by substituted means.
Right.
So I dealt with it.
So Janneh was served.
And we did not, at the time, we did not have a diplomatic mission in Equatorial Guinea. So it was served in another mission with close proximity and overseeing Equatorial Guinea. So indeed, he was served. Now, whether it got to him eventually, I don't know. But at the time, I know I handled that file and handled the transmission of that file of the summons to Janneh.
Now that is established. Now, the other thing I really want us to look at is that already we know that, this is the mandate of the commission. They went beyond that. They did this and that. Now we look at, Augustus Prom and Alpha Capital. Now, these are two different entities, and they were all brought in by the Justice Ministry. Now, what I do not understand is Augustus Prom was identified, and that was a court process. In as much as Batambedu said he individually called Augustus Prom and they had a negotiation and agreed on the terms and conditions, and then they actually told the courts that they want the court to identify Augustus Prom as the interim receiver. Now, interim probably that has a an elapsing point here and there. But what I do not understand that was a determination by the court. Now, the mandate of the commission was to establish truth about Janneh and the ways and means he acquired whatever wealth. Why did the commission feel the need to recommend for Augustus Prom's removal? Was that part of the commission's responsibilities?
Well, first and foremost is that the commission does not have arbitrary powers. So every single recommendation of the commission must be backed by evidence. I do not see the rationale for the commission to give an instruction to do away with Augustus Prom, where he has not been found wanting of any anomaly or irregularities. He performed and carried out his task, did a phenomenal job, and I did not see, even though he was an interim receiver, I don't see any reason whatsoever why he could not have carried on as the receiver.
And then the methodology in which these other people came
how the part I do not get is how even Augustus Prom was handpicked. Yeah. Yes, even though we all know that Augustus Prom did a phenomenal job, but the process handpicking Augustus Prom in itself was not fair and was not according to a fair process.
If you look at it comparatively, in as much as the process is not fair, because one individual justice minister calls people into his office and just gives them jobs like that. But if you look at Augustus Prom, they said he had the previous experience of executing functions like that. But Alpha Capital was registered in 2017 with zero experience as a company in that particular kind of an assignment. They might have those experiences as the individuals within that setup, but as a company, they were just established in the Gambia in 2017, and then they were given this task to execute. Now, could that that defeats common sense that probably these people were asked by the people responsible for handpicking these folks, go and register this particular company and come and we will give you the assignment. Because at the end of the day, the justice minister's girlfriend then, who later became his wife, works for this Alpha Capital. So there is conflict of interest in the
The
performance of not.
irony, the irony of it all, the irony of it all is that I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked to hear the justice minister go on the For the People by the People show to say that even though Alpha Capital was a new entity registered just a few months before they were given such monumental task, he went on to say that Alpha Barry was a very experienced man. But I was shocked to hear a justice minister not being able to divorce between the individual and the entity.
That's what I'm telling you now.
They did
That's exactly what we're
not,
talking about.
Alpha Barry was not appointed as the receiver. Alpha
It was
Barry is
Alpha
an
Capital.
individual.
All right.
Alpha Capital is an entity that is recognized by law, registered by law, is a legal and has the status of a legal entity or a legal person.
An entity with no experience.
So if you look at the response, because Alpha Barry came out with a very strong rebuttal to say that he is only listed as a shareholder, that he did not gain anything. So the argument of the justice minister that Alpha Barry was very experienced, but Alpha Barry has come out to say that he had nothing to do with it. He is only registered as a shareholder. It's there for you to see.
Look, we operate in this ways in most of environmental projects. Even though we have projects in the Gambia, my CV is still used there, and then I don't sometimes participate in the operations of whatever. But then in that aspect, you basically submit some of these things to get some of these activities going on. Alpha actually submitted his credentials, and Bao want to actually leverage on that to say he's an experienced man. But you do not give a job to a man; you give a job to an
But that
entity,
was the
and this entity was
fault.
just
That was
newly
the fault
registered.
of the host of the show, because they should have pressed bar to say that Alpha Capital does not equal to Alpha Barry.
Right.
Alpha Capital is a registered entity, a registered business. When the contract was given as a receiver, you did not give it to Alpha Capital. You did not give it to Alpha Barry. You gave it to Alpha Capital.
Again,
Now, the experience of Alpha Capital does not come into play. It is irrelevant. It is redundant. The experience of Alpha Barry is redundant in this issue. The experience, the niceness, the phenomenal brilliance of Alpha Barry is not in question. What is in question is an entity that was just born in 2017 and given such tasks to manage billions of Gambian dollars. I don't care. I don't care how fair they were. I don't care how objective they were. I don't care how brilliant they were. The facts that remain is that it was a brand new entity. You cannot compare that with Augustus Prom, that is an established entity in the Gambia with considerable
right.
experience of being a receiver, and discarding that for somebody who you say was recommended to you. What was presented to you by way of experience, by way of expertise, by way of jobs that Alpha Capital had done at that moment in 2017 when it was just registered. And that is the fact. So even if Batambedu did that just because it was a recommendation, it will raise an eyebrow.
Now, again, there is another thing. When it comes to Kurang, Batambedu in that show again said he knew Kurang because Kurang was his head boy at high school, and he believed in his ability to execute the job, and as well as he believed in his professionalism and all that. Now, but is Kurang the only Gambian that Batambedu could individually pick, invite to his office, and discuss terms and conditions and recommend him as secretary to the commission? When you have thousands of Gambian with equal expertise and equal professionalism, but Batambedu told us that the reason why they picked Kurang was they wanted somebody who is not politically conflicted, who is not part of partisan politics here and there, who has no, let's say, grievances or probably personal issues or conflicts with Yaya Jammeh. But Batambedu picked Alaji Sedi Barrow as the lead investigator for the TRRC, who was part of a coup plot against Yaya Jammeh. Now, if you tell me in this commission you picked somebody because you do not want to pick somebody who's conflicted in a way or another, but you picked another person there who was in one way or another conflicted with Jammeh
But
as his
but
lead
but again,
investigator.
again, Omar, I don't blame Batambedu. Batambedu was swimming with the tides.
No, but
And the
because
host, hang on, I mean, they're my beautiful friends, I love them, but they were giving him a free ride. Because what I would have raised is that the lead counsel, by the person of Ami Bensouda, who's like my mother, phenomenal person, I respect her, was serving as Attorney General and Minister of Justice under Jammeh.
and was
So,
one of those who actually,
so,
developed decrees.
so how can you justify the independence of Kurang by picking him? But then you also recommended Ami
Who
Bensouda,
was a Jammeh minister, and of
who
course,
was
part
a
of those
Jammeh
who
minister.
actually put up the decrees.
So that argument that you only pick Kurang because of his independence is not tenable.
Right.
It's not tenable.
Now,
But the question again is, where did Batambedu derive the authority to tell Kurang to resign? Kurang was not appointed by Batambedu. He was not the appointing authority.
again, Batambedu I thought this man was intelligent, because when I listened to him, I was like, I thought you were intelligent, but you're
Batambedu
making
was
kind of
never
nonsense.
the appointing
Because
authority. The appointing authority at all times was Jammeh.
now, this
Was
case was Barrow,
Barrow.
the president.
So
Now, if the president
what
appointed
what
the
what
committee,
Batambedu could have done is make a recommendation to Barrow that Barrow should invite Kurang and ask Kurang to resign. Batambedu had no power to ask Kurang to
now
resign.
again, this brings me to another point, because Batambedu feels that he invited Kurang to his office and then discussed terms and conditions and probably recommended him to the president, and the president appointed him. So we think probably he has a stake in it. But if you look at it holistically and you look at it legally, Batambedu has no, rights whatsoever to tell Kurang to resign, because Kurang was appointed by the president. And when Kurang wrote his report, or probably his protest letter, he did not write it to Batambedu, because Batambedu did not appoint him. He wrote it to the office of the president, to the president, because he was appointed by the president and probably answerable to the president. But
absolutely,
actually, when Batambedu was talking on the people, so he tried to make it look like what Kurang did was a bypass. He should have wrote to him. Instead, he wrote to the president. But Batambedu forgot that he did not appoint Kurang. Kurang was appointed by the president. So that is why I said I thought this man was really intelligent. But at some point, when you listen to him, I realized that there are a lot of deficiencies in the way he actually, portrays himself. And this is a person we said is a top lawyer.
no,
But
not
again,
only that. Let me tell you another thing that he said on the show. Another thing I picked up when he went on the show. He tried to establish that the sale of Jammeh assets was in 3 parts. And if you listen to him attentively, he said he was not responsible for the 2 parts, that the only part that the Ministry of Justice was involved in, and that is as a result of the ministerial committee that was set up to oversee the receiver, which was Alpha Capital, and make periodic reports to cabinet by way of extension to the president. But what Batamidu failed to tell or to say or to state on that show was that the second part that he referred to, where he said it was done by the sheriff, how did the sheriff take, what's the right word to use? How did the sheriff get, how did they get any authority over the sale? You know why? Because Batambedu, by extension, the Ministry of Justice went to court.
right.
They were the parties in court.
Now, that is something that also happened in the court system. This one, okay, of course, these are your colleagues, and sometimes, lawyers have their way out in making statements in a way to maneuver around. But the fact is that Batambedu first went to court to freeze Jammeh's assets, and then that was granted. He went back to court to unfreeze these assets, and this lady categorically put it to them in a judgment that he could not do that. Now, there was nothing so pressing that Batambedu had to rely on a vacation judge to get the decision he wanted. But this is a matter that you already got a judgment on, and then instead of appealing it, you refuse to appeal it. You bring in a new, case, take it to whatever, and then the Chief Justice, in a way, decided to give this court, this case to, this guy. How do you call him again?
Justice
Gente.
Judge.
And Gente decided to give them the go ahead on whatever they want. And then in justifying that in that show that he attended, he said that there was this investment, whatever that was happening, and they needed to get on with stuff. Now, but do you actually try to maneuver within laws to actually just go about businesses that have to do with investment? Is investment more important than following the existing principles
But
and
let me
laws in
help
our country?
you on that. Let me help you on that. There's something else he did not say. But Tambedu did not only go to court to get these assets frozen. They went by way of the Economic Crimes Act.
Oh.
Yeah. So the assets were frozen based on a charge. And I'm now looking at this in a different way, because the Economic Crimes Act is not a civil route. It's not a civil procedure. It's a criminal procedure in the penal code. So which means if you have to go to court to invoke the Economic Crimes Act, you would have had to accompany that with an indictment on Janneh, to say that Janneh is being investigated, and that was a criminal pathway. You cannot go to court to get an asset frozen without an indictment. There should have been a charge before the court. Okay? Now, so they didn't just go to court. They went by way of the Economic Crimes Act to say that these assets were ill-gotten through defrauding the state. Now, Justice Amina granted that. But remember, these were interim reliefs. Interim reliefs meaning that you go to court and say that, okay, Omar has my bicycle. And this bicycle, I believe that it is my money that Omar stole to buy this bicycle. So if Omar now sells this bicycle or transfers title of this bicycle or does anything to this bicycle, I will not have my money again. So please, court, can you put a hold on this bicycle? Freeze this bicycle so Omar does not touch this bicycle until the court determines that Omar stole my money to buy that bicycle. So remember, it's an interim order. You freeze the asset in the interim.
Right.
Are you paying attention?
I'm getting it.
You freeze the asset in the interim. So all these properties belonging to Janneh,
right,
you freeze them because we are scared that Janneh is going to dispose of these properties even before the Janneh Commission is established or before we finish with our investigation.
right.
You understand?
I got that.
Now, Justice Amina, a brilliant judge, decided to grant that because it was objective. She wanted to protect the status quo.
Of course.
And protect the assets. She wanted to protect the status quo. So she granted it. Halas, yeah?
Great.
Now, all of a sudden, a pressing issue came. And Batambedu went back to Justice Amina Saho and said, ma'am, court, unfreeze these assets. Pay attention to this. When you went to court initially, you justified the rationale for freezing the asset.
Right.
You said you were going to establish that this man stole, that this man diverted public funds to buy these assets. So when you come back to the court,
You
What
should have
should you
already
present
established
to
that.
the court?
You should have
You
already established that.
should have established that indeed these funds were stolen and they were diverted funds and they were misappropriated, and these funds, by virtue of the Economic Crimes Act, he stole and therefore unfreeze them.
Right.
You present the evidence to Justice Saho.
Right.
You present the evidence to the court, but that was not done. You just come back and say that, oh, we have a pressing issue. There's going to be this. There's some investors here and there. That is not why you went to court.
And
You went to court to maintain the
that
status quo.
was not why you were actually
And
giving
that
the
was
freezing order.
not why you were giving the freezing order.
So they were
So let
just
me
playing
tell
with
you
the
again
court. They
what
thought they could
Batambedu
just
did.
come. Hmm.
Let me tell you what Batambedu did. Before going before Justice Jaite, they decided to circumvent the whole process. And that process was, I know Batambedu cleverly said in the For the People by the People show that the Ministry of Lands canceled the leases of Janneh because the ministry believed they were not obtained legally. But
But does the
what
ministry
but
can the ministry
but
just sit
what
and cancel
but
somebody's
what
lease?
the For the People by the People show, all of them, I was shocked. Coach, brilliant Musa
Yeah,
Jain,
I was.
my big
But
brother
the,
Syrian.
the one thing I
I
keep.
no, hang on. I don't
Okay.
want to lose my train of thought. What I was shocked that they could not tell Batambedu and ask Batambedu whether the Ministry of Lands has the power and authority, legal authority, to cancel leases without a court order.
Exactly what I wanted to say.
They could.
But
Why didn't they go to court and establish that these were illegally gotten by Janneh? Now, it does not matter how Janneh got it. It does not matter how Janneh got it. You should have gone to court because these are lease documents.
right.
What happened to the officials that granted those leases? Where are they?
Exactly.
So what he did was to circumvent that. They went and they canceled the leases.
Now you know
But
that
that
cancellation.
particular procedure was illegal.
Legal.
And then
Exactly.
he said on the For the People by the People show that an affidavit was sworn by one Mr. So let me tell you something. I'll tell you this for free, Omar, on my life. If the Ministry of Justice did not give instructions to the Ministry of Lands to cancel those
They will
leases,
not.
they would never have been cancelled.
Mm. Mm. But again, my point is now. This was a matter before a judge, and then she actually gave them the freezing order on the basis, on the merits of what they've submitted. Now, if you're coming back to unfreeze, you should have completed that task and then present those evidence that we have completed this task on the basis of which you gave us the freezing order. Now unfreeze them. And the judge felt that that was not presented, and she denied you that. Whatever Batambedu did after that, I found that to be very, very, very corny. That Batambedu could go back and say, oh yeah, there were new additions to whatever that case was, and then take it back to court without going to appeal the decision that was initially given. And then the Chief Justice, knowing fully well that this was a matter already that was already presided over, still accepted this case and give it to a different judge, a vacation judge, to just quickly run through it and just give them what they wanted. I concluded that because I know JT, who is an anti-Jammeh activist, will not apply law, because for him, anything and everything that has to do with Jammeh, he's happy because he has personal issues with Jammeh, which we know very well. And that is why at one point he had to be in the UK. Now, law and emotions play out significantly in the operations of this transition government. And in the beginning of it, I think the president actually was so lenient that he allowed Batambedu to operate, on a free range. But there were no checks and balances on the Justice Ministry, specifically Batambedu and his actions. Now that brings us to the reports. The commission, upon doing all their findings, they submitted a report to the government. The president said they know there were missing items in this particular report, but the government had already investigated, went through this report until they came out with a white paper. And then in the white paper, the last page of the white paper, they commended the commission for the tremendous job. And now we are told that that was not a tremendous job. That was like, exceptional scale of looting. that happened in there. But now, in the report where the president said that some of the items were missing in terms of the details of the sales were not done by just one entity. The sales were done by Kurang and his cohort. It was also done by people within the commission. It was also done by Batambedu and the Sirif division whatsoever. So all of these persons who are not, some of them not part of the commission, and some of the sales done by the commission, who was there to compile this report? Each of them are going to compile their individual reports, and they still brings it as the commission's report? That part I'm not very clear with.
Well, the first thing you need to understand is the commission had a mandate, and I'm certain that the commission knew what their mandate was, because what was conspicuously absent in the 9-volume report, which was thousands of pages, was the sale that was done by the Janneh Commission whilst the commission was subsisting. Why would you dispose of certain assets and not put it in the report? That was part of your activities.
But it was done by different
That was
entities.
a crucial part of the activities of the Janneh Commission, and not putting it in the report was deliberate because the commission should not have disposed of the assets, and then, whilst the commission was still on a fact-finding mission.
Even whereas they were done with the fact-finding mission, the commission was there to establish the truth. You cannot be the referee and the judge at the same. You cannot be the referee and the player at the same time. You cannot say all this is wrong and then who will actually put up the prices? That means the commission.
Because listen,
the commission could not do that.
But
again, let me finish this point. One thing I understood is that could the commission put the activities or the sales of the Sirif division in their report? And why was the commission selling items knowing that they could not sell it? Do you know why Batambedu went to court to actually go about the final sales of those cattle? Because they realized that initially what was happening in the commission was outside the bounds, or basically the boundaries of the commission. How did they correct that? Because, like you said, the commission needed to have an interim report sent to the president, and if there were sales to be done, an identified body would actually, be responsible for that, and not the commission. But the commission overstepped its bound and then went on to be selling Janneh's asset in the middle of their, investigation without having any conclusive report yet. And now, if they want to put that in the, 9-volume report, where will that position the commission? Complete trash. So they deliberately omitted that, not only because of the prices, but because it was not part of their job. They overstepped their job, and they went ahead and sold some of these items at, giveaway prices. But again, there is another thing that the Minister of Information said in a GRTS newscast that I watched this morning. He said, some of the limousines are still in the State House, and the reason why they were not sold is because the prices that were offered by the buyers were quite low, and the office of the president decided that they are not going to sell it to them. So that means the office of the president was in one way or another also involved in the sales. Why didn't the office of the president stop the sales of vehicles at 5,000? Now that's another thing, because I thought he was trying to cover up for government, but he was more or less.
No, I think he messed up. He messed up big time. That was the last thing he should have said.
Yeah.
Because remember, the office of the president, Omar, remember, after the Janneh Commission report, there was a receiver that was appointed.
Right.
And all these goods should have been under the custody of the receiver.
Right.
So when was State House involved in selling?
Exactly. And when was State House there to tell those people that, no, you cannot sell it at this price?
Because it was under the auspices of the receiver. Only the receiver could have determined that.
The president told us the other day that because the government does not have the capacity to do so, and that is why they actually appointed Alpha Capital as the receiver. But now, Ismail Aziz is coming out to tell us that State House actually, or Office of the President, stopped them from selling the limousines when the State House was not even involved in the buying and selling process. That does not add up.
And what does not add up is that for 7 years, the report was presented in March of 2019, 2021, 22, 23, 24, 25, 6 years. They're only now coming out to say that these particular cars were not disposed of.
And then the details of the sales were never given.
And the details of the sale were never given.
They actually mentioned the number of cattle, but they didn't.
But what I want to ask is, who determined the sale price of those vehicles? that the president or the office of the state of the president that state has found to be below their market value.
That is exactly where are the valuation reports?
Where's the
And
valuation report? How independent?
if
Not
they
only
were
that, Omar. Not
exactly,
only that, but how independent are the valuation reports?
and if
Now
there were valuation
we are
report,
told, Omar,
mhm.
another thing that's going to come out soon in the open, in the public, is the fact that when the sheriff was even selling the cattle, executing the court order, by virtue of what the Ministry of Justice, by virtue of the matter that was brought to court by the Ministry of Justice, it was the Justice Ministry that brought somebody to determine the price of the cattle for the sheriff to sell. Well, so how can you determine, I don't know, how can you wash your hands in this matter?
Now, what I don't understand is the government actually developed the white paper, and the white paper came out from the reports that were submitted by the commission. But the report never had any details of the sales of whatever material that the commission and all the other parties were selling. Now, how comes the entire cabinet did not notice that these items were
Because
missing, and then the
that's
report
not
needs to
how
capture
cabinet
that?
operates. But that's not how cabinet operates. I'll tell you what I believe would have happened.
Mhm.
Cabinet was never going to sit down. Cabinet, even President Barrow, never sat down and read 9 volumes of report. Lie.
So they don't give him
Batambedu,
summary version. They don't give him a summary
Batambedu,
version. Mhm.
Batambedu never sat down and read 9 volumes of report. The Janneh Commission, one person, one individual did not sit down and compile 9 volumes of report for the Janneh Commission. These are things that were done individually, and then it was collected, collated, and produced into volumes and presented. Now, what would have been taken to cabinet is that these 9 volumes would have been summarized into a cabinet paper.
Right.
That is how it's done. It would have been summarized into a cabinet paper, and that cabinet paper would have been presented by the Minister of Justice under whose banner or purview the Janneh Commission was, and he would have presented the report. Now, let's be honest, Omar. Nobody was going to sit and read 9 volumes of the report.
Of
Okay, it
course.
is not done anywhere in the world. But again, like you said, the president and cabinet was relying on the integrity, honesty, brilliance, expertise of the justice minister. He is the chief legal advisor to the president.
And
When he comes and he tells the president that I have summarized 9 volumes of the Janneh Commission report, that it is a brilliant report, what happens? Cabinet
the president ought to be.
accepts and
Yeah.
then says that, okay, fine. They wholeheartedly accept the commission's report. This is translated into a government white paper, which then becomes a policy.
Right.
It becomes government's position on the Janneh Commission. The Janneh Commission's report was merely a recommendation. The president could have rejected the entire recommendations of the Janneh Commission because he has the powers to. That is why when the TRRC made a recommendation to Janneh, he decided, amongst other things, the TRRC decided they were going to ban Sabali from holding public office. Oh no, was that the Janneh Commission? That was the Janneh Commission.
Janneh Commission.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but some recommendations of the Janneh Commission were not accepted. So this tells you again that the Janneh Commission is only mandated to do fact finding.
Yep.
It is the responsibility of government to accept the facts or reject it. Now, when the Janneh Commission did their report within those 9 volumes, they came to a conclusion that Sabali should not hold office, but the government rejected it. They came to a conclusion that I think Alaji Sise or somebody else should not hold office. The government rejected it. They came to another conclusion. I think it was Nyoguba or somebody should not hold office. The government rejected it. What does that tell you? Government has the power to accept and or discard the report. So imagine, let me just run you quickly to this. Let's flip things around and just make it more spicy.
Mm-hmm.
What if Janneh Commission rejected what if the president rejected the recommendation of the Janneh Commission to dispose of the assets of Janneh, the cattle? What would they have done? They've already sold it, chap.
They will go and get it from the people they sold
They've
them to.
already sold it.
And maybe
So
people
just
already,
imagine.
ate the.
That is why the commission does not have a power to sell.
Exactly.
Because if the commission had made a report to the president
And then
to
got
say
it
that
approved
to say
prior.
that, and the president
Yeah.
approves, then in the final analysis, it will be. I mean, the president will have to be. It will be totally incoherent for the president or the executive to now, after giving approval interim to dispose of the cattle, to now say they will not accept that recommendation. You see how it's just
Let
logic.
me let me let me say this. Generally, or probably for the last 1 year, I'm not a big fan of the president, and I oppose him any way I can. But now here, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Yo, but like he does not understand all of this legal whatever. He's not a lawyer. He cannot know everything, and he relied solely on the technicians to do this job. Now, after all this that happened, and we've realized that people were selling stuff for 500, 10,000, 20,000, 5,000 here and there. Where does the chunk of all this responsibility lie? In as much as we know the president bears the bigger responsibility because he instituted the commission, but here we can tell that the president relied on his technicians who, in one way or another, failed to execute their functions as they should, and then the commission, in my view, should have been, watched by the Ministry of Justice to ensure that all the legal issues are all addressed and they are not going beyond their mandate. But of course, the Ministry of Justice was more or less even, skyrocketing beyond the mandate of the commission and more or less allowing them to do whatever. And then the presidency and the entire cabinet and the entire country left Batambedu to on a free range to do whatever. Now, where does this responsibility lie if we now come to the conclusion that most of these assets were more or less giving at giveaway prices? Who bears the responsibility? What could the president do now after if they have the national? We will come to the National
Yeah.
Assembly after
What's
if
what's
they.
the what's the restitution? What would they do?
That's what I don't know. Like, what would they
They've
do?
disposed of the cattle. They've disposed of everything.
Yeah.
What will they do?
That's what I want you to tell me now. That's what everybody wants to know. In as much as we want to say, yeah, bring out the list here and there. At the end of the day, we know they already sold these materials. People already bought them, at giveaway prices. The president did not receive some of the details of these reports. Batambedu resigned and left. And at the end of the day, we realized that this man has manipulated the entire system and abuse of office, conflict of interest. Any kind of thing you can think about happened during this commission. Now, what's the way forward? What can we do? What should we expect?
Okay. So, for example, I asked somebody a question. I said, okay, now, and I think I said this on your live or was in mine. The National Assembly always had the mandate and authority
Mm-hmm.
to oversee the affairs of the executive.
Right.
Now, from the moment that Alaji Kurang raised a concern, from the moment that the public, some sporadic different individuals were coming up, raised the concern, why didn't the National Assembly look into the affairs of the Janneh Commission and asset disposal of Janneh's assets?
But again, the president appointed Batambedu as justice
No,
minister.
forget about
The same,
Batambedu.
no,
This is not about Batambedu.
let me bring that perspective. The president appointed Batambedu as justice minister and also appointed Kurang as secretary to a commission. Now, he appointed these two people in different capacities. Kurang wrote to him that something was fundamentally wrong within the commission. It becomes the president's responsibility to actually know what exactly Kurang's allegations were. But of course, he relied on Batambedu, whom he appointed, and also appointed Kurang, separately to determine Kurang's fate.
No. Let me give you a classic example, Omar. And this is in support of the president. When Barrow was inaugurated in 2017,
yeah,
and Barrow appointed Claudiana Cole as Minister of Education.
Education, right.
Did Barrow know or knew at that time who the heck Claudiana Cole was?
Probably not. You would know, I wouldn't know. Probably not.
When Barrow appointed Mr. Blaine as High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, did Barrow have an idea who Mr. Blaine was?
Probably not.
When Barrow appointed James Gomez, Minister of Fisheries, before the coalition came together, did he know who James Gomez was?
Probably not.
Now, you need to understand the way things work in government. And like you said, he is relying on his advisors. When that cabinet was being formed, the president was the appointing authority. He had the powers to appoint. But we all know at that time, really, who was the appointing authority.
Certainly, yes.
We all know there's not a single Gambian that does not know at that time who was the appointing authority. So even if all of the appointments was not done by the appointing this de facto appointing authority, we know a few appointments that was really the recommendation of the de facto appointing authority.
Right.
Now, when the Janneh Commission members were chosen, Barrow did not know who they were. Barrow does not know the expertise of Surahata Janneh.
No.
Barrow does not know the expertise of Ami Bensouda. Barrow, I'm sure, did not know who the heck Kurang was. But in all of these things, in matters of the law, in matters of justice, we had a Minister of Justice and an Attorney General. And the reason why Barrow appointed a Minister of Justice was because the Justice Minister should advise the President on all matters of law. The Minister of Justice is the chief legal advisor to the President, but not only to the President, to the Cabinet as well. The Minister of Justice, by virtue of him being the Attorney General, is the interface between the Chief Justice, the judiciary, and the executive. When the Chief Justice wants something, he doesn't go directly to Barrow. He goes to the Attorney General. Remember, the two offices are fused together. You have the Minister of Justice, that is a cabinet position. The Attorney General is not a cabinet position. The Minister of Justice is the chief legal advisor to the President by virtue of his cabinet position. That's a political position. When the Minister of Justice advises the President, he advises the President on law, but with a political lens. It's a political appointee. But when the Attorney General speaks, the Attorney General should speak on behalf of every Gambian. And that is the interface between the judicial arm and the executive arm. So when some of these decisions were made, the sole person that had the technical expertise in both worlds to have an informed decision and advise the President and Cabinet was Batambedu. And I'll tell you this, I can swear on my life that Batambedu knew how much he messed up, and that's why he resigned. Nobody can tell me Batambedu resigned just because Barrow's cabinet was failing, or no. The man had a free hand. He had a free hand. He had a free hand to do whatever he wants. And today, Batambedu will boast that, oh, under my watch, I set up the Janneh Commission. I set up the TRRC. I did this, I did that. Barrow couldn't sit down and think about the TRRC process. Barrow couldn't sit down and think about the Janneh Commission process. I can assure you that Barrow did not even know that Section 200 was in the Constitution that gives him the power to set up a commission of inquiry. He was advised. He relied on the expertise of the people that are around him. Now, the way he relied on the people that were around him is the same way, by logic, that he relied when they came back to him to give him an advice on the report of the Janneh Commission.
That is why I don't fault the president a lot, because
So sometimes it's hard. I will accept that, logically, he is the president and the buck stops at him.
Yeah.
We will put the blame on him. But if you look at it substantively, if you go into it and try to dissect it, you would absolutely understand that it cannot be the president's fault alone.
Could happen to you and I,
this could happen to you, and that was why I gave you the example that I'm a lawyer. Yes, maybe I'm smart in things of the law. Maybe I understand all that, but I don't have scientific experience. Yes, I read a lot, so I might have an idea here or there. But if I appoint a competent person, you see, let me tell you something. You see, when you appoint, you know why ministers are political appointee? Because you choose the people that you trust.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you look at Jawara's government, when O.J. Jallow was appointed Minister of Agriculture, he had no technical expertise in agriculture.
Oh, yeah, but the current Minister of Agriculture is the same.
No, I'm giving you an example.
Right.
But the fact is, not having a technical expertise on a subject in a ministry does not make you incompetent.
Yeah,
it does not make you incompetent. The Secretary General, for example, in Jawara's regime, the Secretary General is the head of the civil service.
Mm-hmm.
So the Secretary General, you are assuming, must have technical expertise in foreign affairs and foreign policy and diplomacy. The Secretary General must have technical expertise in finance, in health, in youth matters, because he is the boss, overall boss of every single permanent secretary in government. But you and I know that that is not true.
That's right.
But when, as a person of competence, you are able to at least have a subject matter idea.
Right.
So that is the distinction between having a subject matter expertise and a subject matter idea or knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was serving as permanent secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, according to the general orders and the Civil Service Code, I can be moved from Foreign Affairs to Ministry of Health. This was what was happening in the Jawara regime, and we had the best civil service in the sub-region, to the extent that if you read Kairaba, it will tell you that other civil service organizations from other countries were coming to Gambia to understudy the civil service of the Gambia.
That's right.
And remember, most of these cabinet ministers in Jawara's did not even have a degree. Some of these civil servants did not have a degree.
You know, if we want to be honest as citizens of a country, most of us thought that this was a very credible man, that he has the capability, the capacity, and the ability to run our justice system. You know, and not just the president and the cabinet relying on him. The citizenry thought that this is a credible man, and then at some point they even gave him Man of the Year award, Heroes Award.
Wait. Let me get into that. Now, again, I will tell you why I fault Barra. Batambedu single-handedly took credit for the Rohingya crisis.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer me for the benefit of the audience. When Batambedu initiated the proceedings at the ICJ, on whose behalf did Batambedu initiate those proceedings? Was it on behalf of the Ministry of Justice, or on behalf of Batambedu, or on behalf of the state of Gambia?
Of course, the state of the Gambia. It was not
the head of state of the Gambia?
Barrow, evidently.
Can Batambedu have initiated such a process without
No,
the authorization and seal of the head of state of the Gambia?
no way.
But
No
today,
way.
when they're giving an award, it's Batambedu they gave an award. Batambedu only works under the instruction of his principal, who's Adama Barrow, who's the head of state.
And I had said something around that some time ago. What I said was like, people, when this new government came in, they told us Batambedo and other people are only coming back to help the Gambia. Oh yeah, they got international appointment, they got very fancy jobs, and they're quitting those jobs just to come and help the Gambia.
That is
But I
not
told
true.
Batambedo that is not
That
true.
is not true.
Exactly. Batambedo
Because if
came
you
to use the
understand,
Gambia
the way international organizations work, you need an endorsement, a
from
secondment
the
from your
government.
state country in order to man certain positions.
This guy came, used the state of the Gambia to actually, project himself in a particular, standing, and use the government of the Gambia to support him to get an international job and quit the Gambia's job for that international job, already having messed up the entire justice system. And now Barrow is there to deal with the mess. But then
Not
all of
only
these
that,
Barrow,
but then Adama Barrow's government went on to endorse the candidacy of Batambedu.
which I don't understand.
And up
So,
till now, they have not withdrawn that.
probably they are waiting for the new investigations to determine. But what else
Or
is going to take?
probably some people are complicit in the highest office and worked at tandem with Batambedu.
On the sales of these assets and the disbursements. That's very right. Those are very much possible. But again, we've taken quite enough time. It's almost getting to 2 hours or somewhere around that. Where would we draw the curtains on this, knowing fully well that if Barrow want to micromanage ministries, we will call him a dictator. But if he leaves these ministers and ministries to operate independently on their own to the best interest of the country, this is what he ends up with. What exactly should the head of state do?
Now, the foremost thing, you see, I don't know how to say this because I don't know how it's going to appear, and I don't want people to come after me. But the truth is, there's a distinction, and I've always said this, there's a distinction between knowledge and education.
Yeah, big time.
You might not be educated, but you can be knowledgeable.
Yeah, right.
Yahya Jammeh was not educated to an extent.
Yeah.
But he was knowledgeable in the sense that he had genuine interest in every single aspect of the state. If you talk to people that work with Jammeh, they will tell you that Jammeh will call you into his office and ask you to open a file and tell you to defend that file. He had genuine interest in knowing and wanting to know. So even though President Barrow is relying on the expertise of his ministers, he has to make it his business to understand the subject matter of whatever ministry that particular minister is manning. President Barrow needs to ask the right questions. President Barrow needs to delve into these ministries, even whereas he does not have a holistic knowledge and or approach of everything that is going on. He can request for basic summary of things.
Right.
So, yes, he does not understand most things. We don't expect him to understand everything, but he has to take genuine interest in understanding the procedures and things of governance. Because if that does not happen, there's always going to be another Batambedu. There's always going to be somebody who's going to shoot him on the foot. And at the end of the day, the buck stops at him. We did not elect Batambedu. The Gambian public did not elect Batambedu. The Gambian public elected Adama Barrow. The social contract between the people of the Gambia and the state of Gambia is between them and by virtue Adama Barrow. They appointed Adama Barrow as the chief prefect, the chief head boy, to take care of their affairs. A social contract was entered into by the people of the Gambia and Adama Barrow to say, we are giving you the chance to lead. We are asking you to make decisions on our behalf, but decisions that are beneficial to us, the decisions that would ensure that every single Gambian, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of creed, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of color, regardless of social status, should and would be able to maximize the best of their profitable potentials in Gambia, because the president, the person they've appointed, is a person that has their interest at heart.
I should run for political office and make you government spokesperson.
Ah.
It's so convincing, my man. Like this is enough education for everybody. I think honestly, like, we've given all parties the benefit of the doubt. In as much as I will fault the president in one way or another, we still give him the benefit of the doubt that there are things that could be improved. And as well, Gambians as human beings
And
generally.
that is why I had a problem with this, with people criticizing the
Yeah.
president's speech.
Yeah.
Because even though the president has failed, we keep saying that you can do better.
Yeah. But
We keep saying you can do better. And if the president comes out to assure Gambians that I have listened to you, I am going to do better, wait for the president to fail. You just cannot dismiss the utterances of the president because you are expecting that he would change. You are expecting that he would learn. But again, if the president does not change, if the president does not learn, the buck stops at the Gambian people. The Gambian people cannot continue to elect incompetence. The Gambian people cannot continue to elect leaders that fail them. The Gambian people cannot continue to support leaders that don't have their interest at heart. There has to come a time when Gambians have to understand and know that when they make a conscious effort to vote in leaders, it has to be based on competence. You cannot do a politics of Benetchin. You cannot do a politics of Sujer. You cannot do a politics of pots and pans. Pots and pans is for a moment, but leadership is for a lifetime. The policies, the decisions, the pronouncements of the president has lasting bearing on every single Gambian. Some of them have generational impact.
Yeah, that's right.
So people need to understand that. You cannot appoint National Assembly leaders that are incompetent. You cannot appoint National Assembly leaders that cannot even speak correct, and the subject verb agreement is disagreeing.
Yeah.
You cannot do that.
We gotta conclude. But now
the fact is, we need to change. Because if we don't change, the leaders that we have are a reflection of who we are. We don't like to say that. We don't like to say these things. But remember, we live in a democratic society and a democratic state. The majority has the voice. And the leaders that the majority elect are a reflection of the thoughts and aspirations of the people that elect them into office. If you don't see a leader for 4.5 years and you only see them prior to election, and they give you Benetchin, they give you Ashobi, they dance Sabbath, and you elect them again, they are a reflection of who you are.
That's right.
They are a reflection of your desires. They are a reflection of your wants. So until we advise ourselves, until we sit at the table and know that we are a stakeholder and that we have a part and parcel in the national cake, and we are honest to ourselves. The average Gambian is not honest to themselves. The average Gambian is sour. They're jealous. They're evil. The average Gambian can see an Omar Malmo and know that Omar Malmo has the competence, but they will suffocate you to death, and they will follow and appoint incompetence because of their benefits.
rejoice over whatever they would have committed,
And they
whatever
will
sin they would.
rejoice over that.
Yeah.
The average Gambian go after their interest. Give a Gambian $5 every day, and the day they come to you and you tell them I don't have, they say you're wicked. They forget about all the times that you have helped them. That is the average Gambian. Even in relationships, even in your day-to-day activities. You have a girlfriend, you're doing everything for them. The day you don't do it, they turn their backs on you. That is a Gambian for you. So we need to change our mindset.
But now,
we need to change our attitude.
Now, after all of this, Melville, we basically know that a lot of things happen within the commission that were not right, outside of the commission on the sales of the assets that were not right. What exactly is going to happen? Do we see this matter going to court? But who will go to court if it has to go to court? Who is to blame in this whole case? Because not the buyers. The buyers actually were called to come and buy materials. Probably if it is sold to them at giveaway prices, they bought them anyway. Either it was open bidding or it was secret bidding or whatever that it was, they still bought them. But those people who are responsible for all these sales, because one thing that is very key here, or one person who is very key here, is the justice minister, because he was basically there to ensure that all of these things follow the right processes and procedures, within law. Now, if that did not happen, and the commission too, went beyond its mandate, do you expect us to go and carry the commissioners to court? Probably no. Are we going to carry Batambedu to court for, probably that's possible, but the buyers probably no. What exactly do you think will be the end of all of these inquiries that they are about to
Nothingness.
happen?
Nothingness.
So
I personally don't believe that anything would come out that is tangible with regards to this investigation.
Right.
Because the commissioners will claim that whatever they did within the subsisting of the commission was mandated by law. You would have to go to court to test the veracity of that, to whether they acted outside the confines of the law or within the confines of the law.
If you're going to court, are you taking the commissioners to court or the commission to court or whatever? That would be something. But then,
and again, the people, I see people attacking people and saying you bought something for 5,000. What the heck? If I see something being sold for 5,000, I'll buy it.
Of course.
That's the truth.
Of course.
The people that are saying, I will not buy, they will buy it.
I will go and buy 10 cars or more. If I knew they were selling cars for that price.
So the truth is, everything that is being done now is to appease public outcry.
That's just it, and nothing will come out of it.
That's just what it is. But nothing is going to come out of it.
Because they will not take the commissioners to court to say you acted, beyond your mandate. But then who was there to actually check them?
And some of these things is going to be so difficult to prove. Even though the allegation is that they share these things amongst themselves and their close associate, you have to prove that. You have to establish. You have to establish that Melville bought this property on behalf of Omar.
Like you said, if you are more or less the man who is actually, investigating, at the same time you are selling, at the same time you go to court, who is there to actually testify against you that you did that?
You know what? I think the only thing that's going to come out of these investigations, or even the parliamentary the select committee, I'm sure they're going to chop some money. They're going to have more allowances and things like that. So whilst trying to catch the thief, they are also gaining. And then at the end of the day, what's going to happen? The only thing I think that would come out of all of this is probably a learning experience for the next commission.
That's what I'm saying. Not even for the next commission, but also for the president to understand that you cannot give people, you cannot appoint people and leave everything to them. It's a matter of putting checks and balances. Even though people would begin to say, oh, you are either micromanaging, you might not get to the level of micromanaging, but ensure that you are interested in the activities and the operations of your ministers. And also make sure that you have checks and balances.
But the truth is, every effective leader is a dictator, because you have to micromanage. Because if you do not micromanage, this is what will happen. You will amount to a failed leader. Yeah.
So, anyway, again, if you look at the National Assembly Select Committee, these are politicians with, political interests from different political parties. Now, it will be the interest of those political groups to say, oh, yeah, this is probably where we are going to keep you at. Now, where is going to be justice? Because these are not independent people in thinking one way or not. These are politicians.
I have to laugh.
Politicians bring about justice?
Omar, I have to laugh. Somebody just said, Brother Mel, would it be possible to invite Batambelu to one of the Facebook lives?
If he is willing to, we will be happy to.
Oh no, you know that's not gonna happen in a billion years.
I wash my hands off that guy when I saw him attacking you without no justification, and now look at where he is. I wouldn't call it karma, but yalla nek ñëpp la fi nekkal.
I know.
In life, a human being be decent and be just in whatever you do.
Yeah.
Not knowing that you use your own girlfriend to actually defraud the state and then take millions out of the country and then probably, go just turn around and marry that person and tell us that, oh yeah, I did not benefit individually, I did not take anything personally. His name might not appear there, but his actions and activities as justice minister basically, contravenes best practice. That guy is corrupt to the core. And Batamedu, if I were Barrow, I will call him wherever he is and I'll put him in jail for abuse of office, for gross negligence of duty, and as well as conflict of interest that is well injected into the commission and the affairs of the commission, and deliberately refusing to submit the needed reports to the office of the president, and the president did not actually account Batambedu and gave him the free right to go, and the government gave him endorsement to go to this kind of international appointment. Batambedu came to the Gambia to use the government of the Gambia to catapult himself to a particular position, use that Rohingya case, make himself look like he was the man behind everything, as if he was the state of the Gambia, and then got a bigger job and the government endorsed him to go when he had already defrauded the country millions. Allowed a commission that did not have a mandate to actually dispose of assets to go ahead with that, and then he single-handedly appointed most of these people into this commission. That is what I did not understand. But Tambedu appears to be a de facto president in the Gambia at the time he was serving as justice minister, and he had the easy and the free-range right to do whatever he feel like doing. And I think Gambians need to account Batambedo. In as much as I fault the president for not accounting him to a certain degree, a lot of these things was simply because the principal believed in the subordinate that he actually gave a particular responsibility to execute, and believes that he was going to execute it to the best of his ability. He had no reason to doubt Batambedo in one way or another, but as well he had that oversight function to ensure that he checks his ministers and their activities, because human beings are naturally Gambians. If we talk with people who think that, oh, you thinking the Gambians are bad, but I'm not saying we are bad, but we are not the best of people in the world in terms of attitude, behavior, and when it comes to execution of our function in public offices. We deal with things with a lot of prejudice and preconceived mentalities, and sometimes outside of the law and logic that needs to be injected. And that is exactly what the commission did. Instead of applying law and logic, and to be fair to Jammeh, irrespective of his evil, they actually went in with emotions and thought that Jammeh never owned anything and he can never own anything, and they started sharing his materials among themselves, probably out of envy and jealousy. You used to have very luxurious vehicles, and you drive some of us around town. Maybe we would have waited for Melville to have a little trouble and say, Angao, 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 let's see his vehicles. That's what I see in here. In as much as we might say Jammeh did not acquire all of these things legally, but then establish facts on what he acquired legally and what he acquired illegally, probably forfeit everything. But you would have already established that Dega B-Mom, he got it legally, this one he got it illegally. No matter what happened, we are going to forfeit everything based on reason 1, 2, and 3, depending on what Jammeh had done within the 22 years as president.
That would have given much
Exactly.
credibility,
But you told us that Jammeh owns
to
nothing.
the commission. But to say that there's nothing, the commission was mandated to look into every single financial activity of Jammeh and then come up with facts by way of a recommendation to say that this, and this was generated from this, and this that was meant for the state.
Right.
It would have been a more credible commission where it was able to establish that this television was actually bought by Jammeh's salary, by his earnings. But because this A, B, C, and D has happened, Jammeh will forfeit this television to the state. That would have made the commission credible,
right?
Because it would have appeared that the commission did not only look at things in an emotional way, but the commission had established the truth surrounding the acquiring of every single asset that belonged to the president.
Certainly, yes. Certainly, yes. I have nothing else to add to that, bro.
I think we've been here for 2
Man,
hours.
And that's yeah, but it's great to learn from you, man. I have got a lot of perspective about all of these things, and now I can't, even yesterday, as much as I tried to say, what the president should have done this and that, but when I reason around things, I'm like, what, the president relied on his ministers, and this is not it's a democracy, and he ought to really believe in the people he appointed. At the end of the day, it depends on the credibility and, of course, the seriousness of these individuals, and the individuals have grossly failed the president,
It's like
including even the commissioners.
it's like having a head teacher in a school. You cannot go into every classroom to determine what the teachers are teaching the kids, the
Right.
pupils. You believe on their expertise. You believe that as a teacher, they would teach the kids things that are appropriate, things that are within the syllabus.
Right.
That is why you give them a syllabus, you give them a guideline. And this is what happens for every single job. The justice minister had a term of reference. He had a job. And the president could not have been present for every single activity or decisions of the justice minister. He relied on his expertise, and he has woefully failed the Gambia and the president, and by extension, the whole wide world, if you ask
Of
me.
course, the whole wide world, man. That guy does not deserve a seat anywhere
But
around the
anyways, Mr.
country.
Ahmad, thank you
It
so
was
much.
nice talking
It's
to you,
been
Malcolm.
absolutely amazing. The engagement was very good,
We
and
we are going to get Kurang on this, so let's see if Kurang
I'm
would
sure
definitely
Kurang will be
Kurang
writing
would
now.
feel
Of course, you know how
comfortable
he
wanting to
operates.
come
He'll be
to the
writing. I'm sure he'll be writing going after us. But I don't think I said any.
otherwise, what we would do is there are a lot of media houses in the Gambia. We are ready and able to really have a discussion with anybody, including
Oh,
Bartolome
I've
Lady
said
on
that.
this matter.
I've said that. I'm ready to
Even
have a public
commissioners,
discussion.
whoever,
I'm ready
whoever
to have
feels like,
a public
yeah,
discussion with whomever, at whatever time. But the truth is, in summary, the Janneh Commission had no mandate to dispose of the assets of former President Barrow.
Janneh. Barrow is still president. He's going to fight you for that. Former president is Janneh.
I'm
Barrow doesn't
Janneh.
want to be former. He wants to run for third term.
Well, that's a subject. I think that's a subject we're going to look at. I think we need to look at the legality surrounding the third term bid of President Barrow.
There are a lot of things to have discussions
A
on.
lot.
Intermittently we'll have this conversation. Even though I think the next time we definitely need to have one in a debate format. That if you support Barrow, I'm completely anti-Barrow. Let's see how that works.
Yeah.
But anyway, probably not. It's
I
good
was
that we're
trying to
having
add
this
Alpha. He
conversation.
wanted to come and join us. I tried to add him as many times as possible, but it wouldn't go
Oh
through.
yeah,
Yeah. But
another
hey,
time, man. Have a
thank you so
wonderful
much,
night.
man.
You know.
Thank you. Have a good night, and thanks to all our viewers. A lot of people I can see have been watching,
Yeah, and they
and it's
stay
quite
through, man. It's quite late in different parts of the world, but people
yeah.
stay through.
People
So
stayed.
these
Yeah.
are conversations that need to get on, and then of course people learn a lot from it. And I personally would thank you a lot, man.
Yeah.
You
Thank you.
quite have
Thank
an
you as well. We
extensive
both.
knowledge in what you do, and that makes me proud a lot because your close associates and people you have things to do with from way back. But anyway, I'm not surprised. We remember when the university had crisis and we had to bring you in to make those wonderful speeches to bring about sanity here and there.
Oh
And
God.
it's not that people praise other people because, for whatever reason, but when you see talent, you see potential, you see capability, and you see people can deliver to the best of their abilities. The good thing as a good human being, you definitely need to, recognize and recommend that, of course, this is a great talent and this is a great potential and this is a great gift to our own country, that people could spare time and talk about issues that are happening within and around our country in the best way they could. It couldn't be said any better. And of course it couldn't be more elaborate than you did. And it couldn't be more educative than this. Probably these are folks from Oxford, so that probably, is a good peg for it. So we call it
Oh
at
my
that.
God.
And then thank you very much.
The
It's nice
feeling is
talking to you.
mutual. Trust me,
Yeah.
man. Trust me. You are a phenomenal person. You're doing amazing, brilliant, always been, and I think the feeling is mutual. I mean, let's continue to collaborate. Let's continue to do this. I mean, it's brilliant. I've got a lot of feedbacks, positive feedbacks from people. There's always going to be detractors. There's always going to be, a one or two
Of
nuisance.
course.
But if they were not there, then life would just be so monotonous. So it's all good. And thank you
Yeah.
so much.
There was a Judas who wanted to sell Jesus for a 30 silver coin.
There's
So if you
always
have
gonna
this
be there's
back in your
always
mind,
gonna be
who
one.
cares
Always.
about? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's live around the clock. Anyway, have
Yeah.
a good night, sir.
All right. Take care. Have a good night, and good night, everyone.
Yeah.